This is Huawei's latest innovation, a trifold phone that destroys the competition. But wait, after the US ban in 2019, Huawei was doomed when the world needed them the most. But instead, it sparked the fire that pushed Huawei to innovate harder than ever before. From making their own chips to inventing operating systems, Huawei proved that they are always 2 steps ahead. Let me explain how. Firstly, what was so good about Huawei anyway? What a dumb question. Just look at the P30 Pro, they dropped a banger just before they got banned. It was a camera king with 5 times optical zoom when the competition could only offer 2x. A 40 megapixel main RYYB sensor that captured more light. Okay, but who cares about the name? We need proof. Okay, Huawei was clearly onto something. They created some real competition and it gave companies like Samsung an incentive to innovate. Even before the P30 Pro, the Mate 20 Pro, the final boss Big Daddy phone, was one of the first phones to use a 7nm chip, which according to Huawei was a lot faster. And it introduced reverse wireless charging, which lets you plop something on the back of your phone and charge it wirelessly like your headphones or even another phone. And of course, Samsung was like, shit, that's a good idea. And they immediately implemented that next year on the S10. And fun fact, in Q2 of 2018, Huawei overtook Apple to become the 2nd largest smartphone company in the world, which obviously intimidated Samsung because Huawei was predicted to become #1 by the end of 2019. And I think you could smell the fact that Samsung shit their pants because at the beginning of 2020, Samsung released the S20 Ultra and it had 100 times zoom, 8K video, and a 5000 mAh battery. This was essentially Samsung's way of flexing everything that they had and reminding everyone who's actually at the top of the market share and that they're not gonna share its territory with Huawei. Sadly, in 2019, that's where Huawei got in trouble and got banned by the US. Long story short, they were accused of using tech for spying, and they were essentially blacklisted from doing any business with any US company, which meant that they could no longer use Google services like the Play Store or Google Maps, or even Android itself. And they couldn't even buy or produce their own chips because the largest chip maker, TSMC, who produces 90% of the world's chips, couldn't work with them because they used US technology. So, this meant that China had to produce their own chips. How unfortunate for Huawei. But what happens when you're told that you can't have something? You want it even more. And what happens when you're not allowed to use someone else's technology? You do it yourself. That's right, America refuses to sell chips to China. China makes their own. America, wait, that's not allowed. Huawei has figured out to do it themselves. However, their chips are about 5 years behind everyone else. But they just keep releasing phones as if they're still competing in the chip market. But it all makes sense because if you look at the P40 Pro, it's 7nm, and then you jump to the Pure 70 Ultra, which is the newest phone from 2024, it's still 7nm. Huawei is now stuck in time ever since they got banned, which is funny because so is Samsung. I don't see them innovating anymore. It's like they don't even care. Obviously, the ban in short term did hurt Huawei, but in the long term, it gave them an incentive to come back even stronger, proving that they don't need the US technology, and what a comeback it was. What truly shocked the world is the Mate 60 Pro. If the US ban had been successful, a phone this advanced should not be possible without importing key components. The US wanted to restrict China's military capabilities to protect themselves, but then the US Secretary of Commerce, or simply the leader of America's business growth, said that America must increase chip making in the US to protect both America's economic and national security. So wait, America can do it, but not China? Anyway, they released the Mate 60 Pro just weeks before the iPhone 15, which is the phone they were trying to compete with. And although the chip is far behind, the sales are still pretty good. As much as the benchmark scores are behind, does this really matter? I mean, look at the Pixel 9, it's far behind other phones, but do people really care? Unless they're gamers, maybe. So if you compare the newest processor from the Mate 70 to the Pixel 9's G4, it's not that far behind, and you got to consider that Google is already on 4 nanometers while Huawei is still on 7. So once Huawei figures out how to make denser chips, they might just leapfrog everyone. Although it's still questionable if they can produce these chips at scale and make it cost effective. Maybe they can't even get to 5 nanometers, yet alone 3 nanometers. You know what they say, it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it. Well, in Huawei's case, it's not the performance that matters, it's how you sell it. And if they can't compete with speed, they compete with innovation. It's in their blood. While Samsung makes Z Folds, a phone that folds in half once, Huawei makes the Mate XT, a phone that folds twice. Meanwhile, Apple is just like, we'll just add a new button. Let's actually talk about the trifold. It's called the Mate XT and it costs $2,800. But hey, it's not that much more than a regular foldable, right? Well, good luck trying to import it because here in the UK, it's £4,000, which is almost $5,000, which buys you about 10 PlayStation 5s or, according to my calculations, almost 4% of a human kidney. So, unlike a traditional folding phone that opens once like a book, the Mate XT opens twice, the second time outwards, revealing a 10-inch screen. Look at it compared to the iPhone 16. How is this even possible? Huawei is 3 steps ahead now. And the reason why this is so special because typically, folded up, the small screen that you get is almost the same size as a regular phone. But when you unfold it, because of the weird square aspect ratio, you don't get that much more viewing space compared to a normal phone. Instead, you get massive black bars. So having this bigger screen only benefits you when you're browsing or reading articles. But with the trifold, unfolding it the second time gives you a wider screen which does give you a lot more viewing space. Clearly, investing 23% of your total revenue towards research and development paid off. Big up Huawei. But with great power comes great responsibility, and having something so massive doesn't automatically make you a better person or a better phone, because having 2 folds inevitably gives you 2 creases and that's more chances to break it. And bro, who gave this phone to jerry-rig everything? Obviously, I recommend you watching an actual review instead of a guy who's yapping about a phone that he doesn't even have. But in case 10 inches is too big for you, Huawei can also give you 7.9 inches because they also have the Mate 6X, which only folds once. I know, how boring. But before I move on, I do want to mention some negative things that I found. So if you look at Mate 70 Pro, the newest phone that they have, the camera design looks oddly less premium than the last year's Mate 60 Pro. And if you look at Honor, Huawei's sub-brand, the X60 Pro came out a month before the Mate 70 Pro and it had the same camera design. So let me get this straight. You make a new camera design that's worse than your last year's design, and then you put it on your mid-range phone before your premium phone? Surely you want to keep your best design for your most premium phone a secret, right? What on earth happened there? Also, what kind of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Scooby-Doo kind of naming is this? You have the Mate 70 Pro, which is normal. You have a Nova 12i, the Nova Y72, the Mate 5X. It goes in 10s, in 5s, in 1s. It starts using every letter of the alphabet, and then it tells me what to do? Enough of that, let's go back to glazing. One massive thing that I didn't even mention yet is software. Remember when I said that Huawei is not allowed to use Google services? Well, that's still the case. And you need to sideload Google apps, which apparently is not the smoothest process, and it just looks a bit sketchy and unreliable. But wait, they're not even allowed to use the Android operating system. Well, that's not a problem, they just invented their own operating system. It's called Harmony OS, and initially in 2021, it was based on code from Android, which let you sideload Android apps. But in 2023, they renamed it to Harmony OS Next, which is a completely separate and independent operating system like the iOS, which means that they need their own native apps specifically designed for Harmony. So wait, Huawei makes their own chips, their own operating systems, their own ecosystems, their own apps? Actually, even their own AirDrop. It's literally AirDrop. They're unstoppable. They never stop innovating. Even after the ban, they take every single possible step not to fall behind, inventing just about anything that they need in order to stay on track on becoming the largest smartphone company in the world. Against all the odds, they adapted and came back even stronger. Huawei is always 2 steps ahead.